The government is joining in a search that's fascinated adventurers for years, and it has very practical reasons. The federal environment minister announced backing today for the effort to find the two lost ships of the Franklin expedition. Sir John Franklin set out with two ships in 1845 to find the Northwest Passage, theoretically a short route from Europe to Asia. But everyone died, and HMS Erebus and HMS Terror disappeared. The search back then had a lot to do with Arctic sovereignty, and Arctic sovereignty is a priority of the present government. David Woodman has spent years looking for the two ships, the Erebus and the Terror. He's made 9 expeditions to the Arctic since 1992. His day job is senior master with BC Ferries, and he's with us from Vancouver. Nice to see you there, David. Can you tell us how you got hooked on the Franklin expedition and the lost ships, the Erebus and the Terror?
I'd like to say that it was for lofty reasons, but it was actually a half-drunken bar bet with some diving buddies in 1979. We were discussing what the best wreck in the world would be to find, and I let slip that I'd been working for 7 years by that time on the Erebus and the Terror, and that I expected to be able to dive on them within 1 or 2 years.
So I didn't realize that that's where it started from. That's fascinating. But what's already known about the fate of the Franklin expedition?
Well, all we've been trying to do for the last 50 years or so is verify the Inuit stories from the last century, or 2 centuries ago, actually, the middle of the 19th century. They told us in very general terms where these two ships ended up. And we are now in the position with modern technology to try and verify where they told us they were. Of course, the Inuit didn't have the same worldview or sense of geography that we do, and there were language difficulties. So nothing is easy in the Arctic, and this is one of the little puzzles that has always fascinated me.
And what have you done trying to find these sunken ships?
Well, I started in 1992. We thought we'd try it to find it magnetically, just like you find a metal on the beach with a metal detector. I was still in the Navy at the time, and I managed to convince the Navy to give me 1 day of flying time on one of their sovereignty patrols to look for it the same way we look for submarines. There was a significant amount of metal in Franklin ships, and we thought perhaps we could pull it out of the background using our sensors. That actually resulted in 62 targets, and so over the years we've been refining the search area, which started at about 500 square miles, down to the point where now we are probably within the last 10 square miles, which is still a significant amount of area.
Wow, okay, so getting closer and closer every day. Now, if the Terror and the Erebus are found, what do you think is likely to be on board?
Well, the focus of my work has been to verify the Inuit testimony, and the 2 prime ways to do that would be to find the wreck, which might contain the ship's logs in it. They were under orders to make duplicate logs, and I can't imagine that they would abandon the ship without having preserved them for what they hoped would be a search party to follow in their footsteps, or to find their main grave sites, where they were also under orders to bury duplicates of their natural records and their logs. All work on Franklin is speculative, and the discovery of either of those sets of records would basically illuminate most of the history.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. What do you think could be learned from these ships?
Well, first of all, the one that I've been looking for, there are 2 ships and they're far apart, but the one that I've been focusing on might be the best preserved 19th century wooden ship in the world. Most wooden wrecks, as a wreck diver I can tell you, are not very exciting. Only in the Great Lakes, where I grew up diving on wrecks, fresh water preserves them and Arctic water preserves them. So this one, the Inuit stories say it sank very gently. It sank upright, the mast was still above water when it hit the bottom, and it might be one of, as I say, the most beautifully preserved wrecks in the world. Failing finding the logs, if we find that it was at anchor, that will also elucidate some of the Inuit stories about whether it was still manned when it arrived in that section of the Arctic, which would also put a wrench in the standard reconstruction of what happened to the Franklin expedition, because most historians assume that it drifted to that position.
I just want to ask you one last final question. Now, you've been working on this project for so many years. How will you feel if your rivals, because there are rivals involved looking for this too, beat you to it?
Well, when I first heard about the expedition, I felt a little bit like the guy who's been building rockets in his backyard when Kennedy announced that NASA was being formed. I actually have been looking for the graves as well, so I wish them all the best. I hope they find it. It doesn't really matter who finds it. And if they do, then I'll switch my target to the graves. And if they don't, then as we've eliminated some area, they'll have eliminated more, and we'll reconsider whether we want to take up the challenge in 3 years when their project ends.
But you'll lose that drunken bet, right? If you don't find it.
Well, I just said I'd dive on it. I did say I would find it, but I'm going to hedge my bet and say that before I die, I'd like to dive on it.
Oh, there you go. Okay, David, great to speak to you. Thanks very much and good luck.
Thank you for having me.
More than 160 years ago, Sir John Franklin's expedition disappeared in a doomed search for the Northwest Passage through Canada's Arctic. A lot of people have looked for his two ships since then. Now the Canadian government hopes it can succeed where others failed. Ottawa is contributing $75,000 to the effort to find Franklin's ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. A few of the artifacts recovered over the years were on display when Environment Minister John Baird made the announcement today.
I am sure every historian, archaeologist, and storyteller is as excited about this as I am, and this announcement and the search for these two vessels, which has the allure of an Indiana Jones mystery. The expedition will provide important new information and will add to the important body of research on the fate of these ships.
The two ships were last seen in the late 1840s. Baird said the mission will add greatly to Canada's claim of sovereignty over the Arctic waters.